An anti-trans crusade has overtaken the United States. Sports bans, bathroom bans, healthcare bans, speech and education bans. And latching onto it is a movement that's been waiting in the shadows for a decade. Conversion therapists are back. Conversion therapy is a colloquial term, and it refers to general attempts to change someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. For a long time, some psychologists used techniques that were essentially torture, electric shocks or chemically induced nausea. Today, conversion therapy looks different. Much like talk therapy, it's with a religious advisor or a licensed therapist. For the most part, though, the underlying goal remains the same: to change who people are or who they love. Some people actively choose this path.
I left the homosexual lifestyle 16 years ago.
We've experienced a change in our sexual orientation.
I was given the freedom that helped me to come out of the gay lifestyle.
Some are minors put into therapy by their parents or guardians. But according to the Trevor Project, at least 1,300 of these therapists are still practicing as of last year. So it's time to start paying attention to them. To understand the role these therapists are playing in today's anti-trans politics, I started in Las Vegas, at a conference put on by an organization named the Alliance for Therapeutic Choice and Scientific Integrity. I'd taken notice of the conference because the group putting it on has been active in the ex-gay movement since the 90s. And because of something else. Last year, I received a trove of leaked emails that illustrated how a network of anti-trans activists and powerful conservative Christian organizations were working closely with state lawmakers to draft and push anti-trans laws all across the country. Some of the Alliance's people were included in those emails, and now they were getting together in Vegas for the first time in 4 years. Were they priming for a comeback? The presentations were illuminating, to say the least.
The real war that is raging is a religious war. The real war is up at the cultural level, the worldview level, secular, pagan, atheistic worldview. So we try to understand the abnormal thinking and come to help the person attain flourishing.
This talk's a little more focused on sexual orientation change efforts, but I think it's relevant as well to gender identity change efforts. Instead of calling it SOCI, we call it SciSOCI now, self-initiated sexual orientation change effort. Well, hopefully that can be introduced into the literature and maybe gain some traction.
To be clear, the American Psychological Association, the leading organization of over 150,000 psychology researchers, educators, and clinicians, has long maintained that conversion therapy, A, just doesn't work by any credible measures, and B, is associated with serious harm, including suicidality.
This fact has not gone unnoticed by professional organizations. More than a dozen of them in the United States alone have taken the time to create policy statements against gay conversion therapy.
APA has held an official position against conversion therapy.
These treatments are inaccurate, prejudicial, and have no basis for a positive outcome.
But that's not stopping these therapists. None of this is new. The Alliance was initially founded in the early 90s as the National Association for Research and Therapy of Homosexuality.
Ryan says his parents were determined to change him. They signed him up for what's called reparative therapy with the National Association for Research and Therapy of Homosexuality, otherwise known as NARTH.
The ex-gay movement was exploding.
Parents are learning about a program called Exodus, which claims to convert gays.
Texas Republicans recently endorsed therapy that purports to turn gay people straight.
NARTH became a particularly insidious arm of the movement, defending conversion therapy from an allegedly scientific point of view.
It's the understanding that same-sex behavior is an attempt to repair your childhood emotional hurts.
They set themselves up as an alternative professional association to the APA. They held conferences, published papers, and organized therapists who shared their worldviews, all with the goal of legitimizing conversion therapy as a practice. The APA responded to this growing movement by assembling a task force in 2009 to examine the evidence and the claims being promoted. They released a landmark report that found no compelling evidence that sexual orientation could be changed with psychological intervention. Judith Glass-Gold, who led that 2009 report, recently extended the research review up to 2020 and concluded that there's still no credible evidence that sexual orientation change efforts work. The APA report did major damage to what NARTH declared to be the science behind its practices. Then things began to unravel for them. In 2012, Robert Spitzer, a leading psychologist who authored a major study of conversion therapy methods, including those supported by NARTH, apologized and admitted that he didn't know whether anyone in the study had actually changed their orientation.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God.
Yes, I do. The problem is I didn't really consider, and I'm kind of almost embarrassed to note it, I didn't have a method of knowing whether someone had really changed.
And one of the final nails in NARTH's brand was when a board member was photographed in a Miami airport, returning from Europe with a gay sex worker.
And in our number one story today, George Allen Rakers has resigned from his group that claims to cure the gay away.
The young man who Mr. Rakers brought to Europe told the paper that he had spent part of each day on that trip giving Mr. Rakers massages.
He resigned from NARTH and insisted that he had not engaged in any of what he called homosexual behavior. By then, public awareness around the harms of conversion therapy and the ex-gay movement was growing.
Hawaii has become the 11th state to ban it.
On a historic day today in Utah, as the state became the 19th state to ban conversion therapy for minors.
President Barack Obama has called for an end to controversial therapy programs that seek to change the sexual orientation of gay and transgender youth.
NARTH needed to pivot, so they rebranded into an organization that puts on conferences like the one I went to in Las Vegas. None of the people I met at the conference would call what they do conversion therapy per se. Instead, it's safety, which stands for sexual attraction, fluidity, exploration, and therapy. Or it's reparative therapy, or even mindfulness. The emails I got a hold of last year were a sneak peek into how the Alliance had their hands in today's renewed anti-LGBTQ movement. Copied on those emails were the Alliance's president-elect, a retired Alliance-affiliated counselor who acts as an advocate for the group, and Michelle Cretella.
So how can we, as physicians and counselors, begin to help gender dysphoric children embrace their bodies? If we don't stand up, who will? So solutions be rooted in reality, and transgender ideology is not. This is child abuse.
All three of them have testified against gender-affirming care in state legislatures.
I'm here as a proxy for Dr. Michelle Cretella. The state of Rhode Island has no interest in protecting gender experts who are the equivalent of yesterday's expert lobotomists. And again, these are the words of Dr. Michelle Cretella.
Cretella was explicitly cited by a U.S. senator as a doctor opposing gender-affirming care as eugenics. And as this anti-trans legislation is being pushed to state lawmakers, Cretella and her colleagues are pushing to overturn bans on conversion therapy for minors.
This morning, controversial conversion therapy programs are allowed.
Repeal the ban on conversion therapy.
A bill to repeal the state's ban on conversion therapy for minors.
In Alabama, Florida, and Georgia, the federal 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that banning conversion therapy violates the First Amendment.
An appellate court found that law, which stops therapists from trying to change a child's sexual orientation or gender identity, violates the First Amendment.
A ban now declared unconstitutional, according to this 2-1 11th Circuit ruling.
And in Indiana, state politicians recently passed a law preventing local governments from outlawing this practice. Separately, Nebraska now mandates minors who are seeking medical care for gender dysphoria to undergo 40 hours of therapy that does not merely affirm their identity.
Teenagers and adults who have transgender belief can come to embrace their bodies, can heal.
It was the question of how to heal trans children that was a centerpiece of the Vegas conference. Clinicians I spoke to were adamant they could treat trans kids with a similar approach they used for gay people.
In our current culture, in which children are being indoctrinated with transgender belief from the moment they're out of the womb, they're being indoctrinated into gender confusion from preschool forward. So no, with a gender confused child, the family absolutely needs our help.
The conference I went to was small, and at times the people speaking came off as almost silly. But it was also frightening. It confirmed for me how a political movement that sees transness as a problem includes people who believe conversion therapy is a solution. That's who's waiting in the shadows if anti-trans extremists get their way. If you want to support my work and other investigations like this, I hope you subscribe to Mother Jones. Thank you.